Welcome to Blooming a Better Self. My name is Jennifer Solomon, and today our segment will be focused on mental health. And we have a guest speaker today. His name is Mr. Wayne Head. Mr. Wayne, will you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm a master's level social worker, MSSW, Master's of Science in Social Work from the University of Texas at Arlington. I received that degree in May of '91. I got my bachelor's degree in social work in Las Cruces at New Mexico State University in I was awarded in 1984, or 83, but I earned the degree in '81. I also earned a degree in sociology in 1980, so I didn't claim the social work one until I needed it for graduate school. So it looks like there was a 3-year gap in my schooling, but actually I did both of them back to back, used each other, sociology and social work, as electives for each other, and was able to get 2-for-1 deal at New Mexico State University, a bachelor's in sociology, bachelor's in social work. I've been a child protective services social worker in Nevada, Illinois, 3 counties in New Mexico. I was a supervisor of social services at the county office in Roosevelt County, and then a little bit after that I hired on with the Clovis Municipal Schools in 1995, November of 95. So for almost 24 years I was a mental health counselor, a clinical social worker for the Clovis schools, working mostly with children that have been diagnosed or as needing special education services.
Oh, wow, great. Well, it's good to have you here. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
So let's get started with these questions.
All right, ma'am.
Alrighty, so the first one is, what is the importance of mental health?
Well, it's like physical health. If you don't keep yourself healthy, with mental health, you can make some really poor decisions. It can lead to other things. Some clinicians do diagnoses. They do what's called a differential diagnosis. And what a differential diagnosis is, you look at the criteria for different diagnoses. You may even do some testing. And you look at it and you come up with 3 or 4 ideas of what's going on with this person. But you always list at the top substance abuse and depression, because those can be deadly, because people who drink or take drugs can drink and drive, or be impaired, make poor decisions around weapons and things when they're impaired. And people who are depressed can get to the point where they feel so hopeless, so helpless, that nothing's going to change, that they reach for what's called a permanent solution to a temporary problem, one that isn't necessarily as big as it feels. It feels big, but it's also, depression is one of the more treatable and fixable things, conditions, mental health issues in the mental health field. Does that make sense? So people should, if you're anxious all the time, you're going to create a lot of stress hormones and chemicals in your body. You're going to really strain, even in the brain, the chemical releases there. You're going to strain your heart, other organs in your body. It's just not, your muscles are tense all the time. You don't sleep as well. You're constantly reacting to events. Same thing with fear, same thing with depression. If you change those chemicals in the brain, and you can actually, to some degree, change the chemistry or the structure of the brain with some of these things. And so poor mental health can really affect your physical health, as well as just how you feel or how you make other people feel.
And I heard you talking about the chemicals in your brain, and that leads me to my next question. I myself have talked to a counselor before, and she mentioned something about situational depression versus chemical imbalance depression, and I was a little unsure of those differences, and I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit more about that.
The situational depression is kind of a new term for me. In the DSM-5 diagnostic manual. Different types of depression, but none of them say chemical dependence or situational. But what I'm understanding from the question, but there are about 3 different types. There's a clinical depression, and then a dysphoria, and there's another labeling of depression, and that's outside of the 2 types of bipolar disorder. And so what they're talking about with what it sounds like they're talking about is like situational depression would be someone breaks up with you, someone was important in your life and they're gone. It could be grief, it could be that they've broken up with you, but it's a loss most likely. I mean, so it could cause some situational depression. That over time, as you deal with the loss, depending on the type of loss, what I'm trying to say, someone dies is one kind of loss. Someone breaks up with you, feels real tough, but it's not generally felt for a long period of time unless you have an issue with that, an issue with grief. And I'll talk about that in a second, what I'm talking about, what I mean by the issue with grief. But so it can create a situational depression. A long time ago, someone I was, it was a girlfriend, got hurt, and I had situational depression probably for about 3 to 4 months. And at one point, I was so depressed, and this is a real personal story. My uncle was an alcoholic, and he lived next door to me. I owned 2 trailers, and he was in the second one. He had moved out from Texas to live with me. And I got so depressed one night, I thought, I'm going to go drink. I'm going to just go get drunk, which is a problem. I thought, well, I'm just going to get drunk. I felt so worn down physically from the depression that I couldn't walk the 40 feet to his trailer. And my uncle knows I don't drink. I've been a teetotaler, I call it. I've been abstinent for something like 24 years or so. 23, I'm not sure, 20. I didn't mark it down. Oh, I'm abstinent today. But I decided, I did that because I was going to sweat lodges in Shallow Water, Texas. I'm part native, and you couldn't go to the sweat if you had taken substances. So I said, I'm at best a light social drinker, so I'll cut it out. But this day, it came to me to go over there, and thinking about him interviewing me, grilling me, Wayne, why are you drinking? What's going on? Why you don't drink? What are you doing? It was too heavy, so I went to bed. I woke up and I started dealing with my depression a little better. I asked a friend, because this had happened to me twice, where I had thought, I'll just go get a case, or not a case, 6-pack and get, I'm a light drinker, a 6-pack and get drunk. And I didn't follow through either time, because I've never done that in my life. But I thought about it twice, and I asked this alcohol counselor, and it was called KDAC at the time, and he was a recovering alcoholic. I said, if I've never done that, if I've never actually actively taken alcohol to deal with a problem, why would this come up as something as a solution in my thoughts? And he said, if alcohol, and I had drunk, socially, he said, if alcohol has ever changed the mood for you, whether you intended it to or not, it will always come up as a possibility, and you need to be aware of that. Does that make sense? That's why I shared that personal story.
That does make sense.
Yeah.
Because
So now back to the grief thing. So one of the things, the way I delineate sadness and depression, normal anxiety and anxiety that leads up to panic attacks, is that what I tell the kids is almost all the diagnoses in the DSM-5, not all of them, but most of them connect with things that we do naturally. There are some situations where it's good to be anxious. If you go to the zoo and the door to the tiger's cage is open and you see wet footprints leaving it, but you don't see any other footprints, that's a good time to be a little anxious.
Yeah.
Key in on that and go, okay, what should I do here?
Yes.
But if every minute, every thought, everything is an anxiety, what if I don't know what's going to happen? I'm not sure. And I've gone through those. It sounds like I'm making fun of it. It's a human condition. But if those things become oppressive in your life, push too much in your life, that's when it's a mental health issue. That's when you need to seek help. Same with grief, with loss, with sadness, with anger. You know, it's naturally normal to get angry about certain situations. It's different about how you handle it. It's not normal to put your hand through somebody's car because they came 3 feet close to you at a crosswalk or something. You know, put your hand through a windshield. That's not normal. That's a problem with anger. Is that simple, but does it make sense?
Yes, it does make sense.
Okay.
I'm actually personally a very, very anxious person, and I constantly deal with the whole, what if this goes wrong, or what if that happens, or so.
And what I would tell my students is that they did a study somewhere. I heard this on the radio a couple of years ago, and for most people, 9 out of 10 things that you worry about never happen.
Yeah.
They don't even occur. And there's no guarantee that the 10th one will either. It's just 9 out of 10 don't. So the 10th one might, or it might not. And so we're wasting psychic energy, physical energy, mental energy on an issue that doesn't even happen. Kind of a waste of effort.
Yeah, it's just hard to.
Now, yes, thank you for saying that. 'Cause my next statement was, that doesn't mean that you should feel like, oh, this is foolish what I'm doing. I feel we get tricked by our emotions, by our thinking. And so we can learn strategies, and that's what I do a lot in my therapy, is to teach strategies on how to deal with things that push on us, like anxiety, depression, anger, ADHD, attention deficit. One of the things I do for the kids is I came up with a worry shield. And so I ask the kids, what is worry? And so they tell me about their worry thoughts and what is worry. And I say, well, what's a shield? What's a shield do? Well, it protects you from what? Things that come at you, arrows, knives, rocks, etc. What does it do? It blocks those, keeps you safe, right? Okay, so we draw on a piece of paper and I have them draw a shield. And I said, now I want you to put that shield in your mind. So, and then I draw arrows coming towards the shield, and then I draw them curving away. And I say, so as those worry thoughts are coming, the what if thoughts, the oh my gosh, what's going to happen, the I don't know, those tricks of ADHD, of anxiety, my ADHD anxiety, bring up your worry shield. And one of the things, I had a boy a while back that was having severe panic attacks, and when he got done, he actually sat through a class with a panic attack occurring and just sat and kind of watched it occurring in his mind and in his body. And that's when he knew, I've got this. I'm in control of this. It's no longer in control of me. And so he would feel those anxiety thoughts come. And he said to me one day, and he would just watch them, kind of like scenery. And he said to me one day, I'm still having some anxiety thoughts. And this had been months past we'd stopped the panic attacks, and he'd been doing much better. And I said, now, ma'am, did you think when we started this that you weren't going to ever have anxiety in your life again? And he goes, kind of. And I said, well, yeah, sure, we would all want that. The reality is anxiety's natural. What we do with anxiety, if we let it trick us, is different. And I said, so what did you use to stop the panic attacks, and what did you use for anxiety? And he looks at me, well, what you taught me. I said, okay, I want him to hear it. And so I wasn't having a senior moment. And so I said, so what did you specifically do? And he said, I did what you told me, which was, if I don't know enough about the anxiety thought, leave it alone. I don't have enough information to address it. Push it away. I'll deal with it when it comes down the road and I have more information. But for now, just let it go. I don't have enough to process this thought.
I wanted to ask how one knows when it's time for them to seek help.
I think what we talked about, when it feels like a push, when it's overtaking your life, when this thing, this emotion is too big in your life, if you're thinking about it all the time, if you're telling people about it, if it's making decisions for you, oh, I can't go on a trip because the tire will blow and we'll all die, then that's not, hopefully that never happens for you, but that thought is over the top. That's more than normal.
And what happens if you seek help, but you don't feel a difference? Does that mean you're not putting enough effort into it, or is it?
Do you eat peanut butter?
Yes.
Okay, if you get a bad jar of peanut butter, do you give, not bad, but you just don't like it, it's a little oily or a little lumpy or whatever, do you never eat peanut butter again?
No.
You do what?
I buy a different brand of peanut butter.
Look around till you find that fit for you.
A fit for you. How does
Okay.
one know what that right fit is?
You know, some therapy may take months. Get to that point where you're ready to, especially as an adult. So you tell a kid, do this, and he does it. You tell an adult, and they go, how much? Why? How's this going to help? What's going to happen? So to answer your question about fit with therapy, they may be asking you to do things, like I'll tell kids, I want you to practice this. And then they'll say, I practiced that and it's not working. And I said, well, that's step one of a 4-step thing. You're still a step 1, and I wanted to be at step 3 by now. So let's move to step 2, and these are older kids, middle school, high school. Let's move to step 2, 3, and 4, and we'll see if it works for you. But one way is to ask the counselor, I came in for this, why are we talking about that? And if they can't give you a good answer, get another jar of peanut butter.
Yeah. What are some of the biggest misconceptions about therapy for you?
I don't see it as much. I think we've done a pretty good job of talking about mental health, but I know some kids have said, I'm not crazy.
Oh.
And, and so there's that thing of people think I'm crazy, I must be crazy, I'm not crazy. One boy told me, and I'll clean up his language, he said, I've had counselors that ask me why I'm still drinking or offending, and why did I do that? Am I offending today? Did I offend last week? What did I do? Did I get mad if their thing is anger? And he said to me, that poop doesn't work. And I said, I know that poop doesn't work. That's why I don't use it. And I said, so what I do is I teach life strategies. I'll teach you to deal with your anger, to get better with your anger, so that you're in control instead of anger being in control. Would you want to get on board with that, man? Would you like to do that? And most kids, let's go. And that's what I do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does. I feel like I need to find somebody more like that. Because usually, I don't know, I feel like eventually I reach points with counseling where I don't have anything left to talk about, but I still don't feel like I've been helped.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Right. Well, see, and I'm not the typical counselor. I've been seeing a counselor, and he basically sits and talks to me. What about this? So what's going on with that? How did you do? And what's interesting is I almost do chess with him. I'll sit and I'll go, oh, that's a good point. I'll think to myself. I never tell him, oh, score one for you, But I'll say things to him or I'll open up. But until recently, I had a real cathartic moment where I actually just opened up and said some things I hadn't said to anybody else in the intensity and manner. I'd been leaking out this information. The neat thing about a counselor is you tell them and it doesn't go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to be on the New York Times. It's not going to be talked about at the water cooler. You can say the most wild things and they're supposed to go, okay. And if they think it's dangerous, they'll challenge you about that. Well, why would that be a good idea? How could you not do that? But I opened up to him in a way that was I just hadn't been doing with others, and I think I was kind of afraid to turn it loose in the way I did. And it really was cathartic. It really did help. And I told him, I said, man, that was good. Thank you so much. Now, my counseling is I try to deal with strategies. I try to teach you techniques and ways to deal with these things. So when they happen, now, 2 weeks from now, a year from now, 10 years from now, if you keep the information and you practice it, have it somewhere and go, what did Head say to do? Look it up and try it again. It'll work for you. It'll help you do those things. Recently, I changed jobs, and I've been doing a lot of what if and anxiety, and I tell my friend about it who's a counselor, and he looks at me and grins, and I go, I know I know exactly what you're saying. It's the same thing I say to myself. And it's what I teach the kids. But we all do it. And so I can catch it and label it, so therefore challenge it faster than some folks. I'm getting better at tricking it than it's tricking me. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. Yeah.
And so I use kind of a Native American idea of the trickster stories. Out here, it's the coyote. Up in the Northwest, it's a raven. For my grandfather's people in South Carolina, the Catawba people, it's the possum. For the northern people up in mostly like the Lakota, Nakota, Dakota people, the Sioux people, it's Iktomi, the spider. But different people have different trickster stories, and these trickster stories teach you how to look for tricks in life, whether you're tricking yourself or other people are trying to do that. And so I use that idea of the trickster, of our emotions, our thoughts being not intentional, but being tricksters. So we're going to trick the trickster.
It does. So then, is it more like, in order to kind of find, or to better help yourself, is like finding what like the root of the trigger?
And the way I do that for kids is I say, ask yourself, why do I feel this way? What's going on? One of the things I use for anger, clinically, they talk about anger being a secondary emotion. And so what I do is I take some clay and I have them make a little mask. And I say, make a face that depicts anger. And we put it to the side. Then we take a ball and we roll it into a ball. And I say, now put another emotion on the head here that's not anger and it's not happiness. So mostly it's anxiety, worry, or fear. And so now put the anger mask over top of it. Then we look at it, then they take the anger mask off, and then I try to guess what that emotion they depicted on the head is. And then I do the same, so they guess what mine is. And we talk about it, and I say, so always behind anger is another emotion. If you undo anger's job, which is to protect you from feeling sad or scared or worried or depressed or whatever, if you take depression off, or anger off, and deal with this emotion, anger goes away because it no longer has a job. Does that kind of make sense?
That does make sense.
Does it come close to answering your question?
Yeah, it does.
So it's figuring out, why am I feeling this way? What's really going on? And see if there's an underlying message. You know, every teacher's always treated me this way, or seems like nothing ever goes right, or every time I start to feel good, something punches me in the nose, or, check those questions and ask yourself, is that really true? And then another way to look at it is through rational motive behavioral therapy, and to say to yourself, one, how do I know this to be true? And it could be worse. So by leveling it, by saying it could be worse, it's really powerful to say that. It brings it down to where you can handle it. So it's not this could be worse item, so I've got it. And that's one of the things that I would tell kids. So tell yourself, I've got this. Mm. So I think people just need to look and say, am I okay with being sad or depressed or whatever? Or should I...
or is it like something they can handle without counseling?
Right. Or should I do something else? And sometimes there's a thing called seasonal affective disorder. And when you spell it out, it's SAD.
Oh.
SADD. And SAD, seasonal affective disorder. And what it means is you don't get enough sunlight. That's not a problem here in New Mexico for most people.
Yeah.
But in Europe, it's a problem. Back east, it's a problem. And so just having that sunlight. So what you could do, let's say you're having some simple depression, or what did you call it? It wasn't simple, it was situational depression.
Yeah.
Get out and walk more. And walk at a sprightly pace. Don't walk, don't stumble through your day. Get your head up, move your legs, and walk for a little bit. Another thing you can do for depression, for sadness, is they found that if you will smile or laugh for 10 minutes a day, and it doesn't have to be consecutive. It'd be nice if it was, so a whole 10 minutes altogether, but 10 minutes a day, it actually changes some of the chemicals in the brain. And even if you don't still want to feel sad, biologically, physiologically, you can't.
So smile even if you don't
So
feel like
smile
smiling.
grab something, look up something on your personal entertainment device, your phone, and Google some funny cat videos or whatever, and laugh at that for
10
up to
minutes
10
a
minutes.
day.
10 minutes a day. Walking is great. You get out in the sun, but also just walk, just move. Because what depression does a lot is pull us in. And so we just kind of, it's almost like a stew. We seep in that feeling and that emotion. So undo it. Get out, walk, talk to people, but mostly walk and then do some of the laughing. And
And the smiling.
does that sound good?
Yes.
And or go see a therapist.
Hint, hint. How can you help someone, like if you personally don't have depression or anxiety or any mental health issue, but you have a friend that does, and they don't personally ask you for help or anything, how can you be there for them without kind of like...
A couple different ways come to mind. One is the don'ts. Don't tell them get over it. Don't tell them you're blowing this up. It's bigger than you make it out to be. You cannot quantify someone else's pain, physical or emotional. And so they say this is awful, say okay. But you can maybe talk to them about, is it as awful as a 20-car pile up on the highway? Well, no, it's more like a fender bender. Okay. So you can help them to rate it.
Okay.
You can come up with other analogies, but does that make sense?
Yes. So,
You can just be there. You know, I talk about God gave me these big ears. Listen to him, you know. You know, if you feel you need to guide them a little bit, you might say, you know, have you thought about? Another way, I'll tell a parallel story. So I'll know their life, what they've presented to me or their parents have presented or the teachers have presented. So I'll know a piece of that, and I'll tell a story of, say they're a boy, about a little girl who went through this issue. And most kids will go, Mr. Head, that happened to me too. You're fooling, is that right? And so then we talk about, well, what could the girl do? So now he can step outside himself and see what he would suggest she do. Then he can apply it. Then you need to draw the line and say, now that thing you said you did, could you do that too? Well, I guess I could. So sometimes just being an ear, but also just kind of gently nudging or saying, well, have you tried this? Or what do you think about this? Or like I say, I use stories. I use a lot of stories. So there was this guy who, you know, and then they can draw those parallels if they wish.
well, I've really enjoyed our interview. So to finalize, I just wanted to ask if there was any other coping mechanisms or any other suggestions or anything you want to share about like depression, anxiety, maybe other any final details.
Yeah, there's several things you can do. One of the things, like for just especially anxiety and depression go like a tag team in a wrestling match. You know, they tend to. Now you can have anxiety without depression, but you almost never have depression without anxiety. It can happen, but most time they go together. And so if you can take care of one, then the other one's more reasonably dealt with. You feel like you can handle it better. But when you're being tag team, it's too much. So one of the things that you can do for anxiety is not to run away from anxiety. What I'm going to tell you is not a way to like take a pill and all of a sudden it's gone. But it's to, I call it untangling the knot that anxiety created. And that's to do some relaxation. And there's several different types. There's I like the active progressive. Active is where you tighten the muscle and then you relax it slowly. Now do it to a count of 3, and then you say to yourself, my hands are warm, my hands relaxed. Because when our muscles are warm, they're soft and easy. When they're cold, they're tight and tense. We shiver, right? So you tell yourself, even if you don't feel like your hands are warm, you tell them they're warm, and eventually, like a thermostat, they'll become warm. the body will send blood into the skin of your hands and your hands will feel warm. So you just tighten, hold it, and I say, find all those little spots of physical tension. Gather them up. Now slowly, and then sometimes I'll tie it with breathing. Breathe out in slowly. Let your fingers feel long and relaxed. My hands are warm. My hands are relaxed. And you do it progressively. You can go up and down, from the top down or from the bottom up. But as you relax muscle groups, you don't re-tense any. So when you're down here on your legs, you're not tensing up, And so usually by the time you get down, you have a feeling of physical and emotional relaxation. Another is diaphragmatic breathing. And I tell the kids I keep myself fat so they can see this. You just slowly breathe in diaphragmatically from here, not here. I think you're doing it. Hold it. Now I do it in threes. Breathe in 3. And always count, because that gives your mind something to do. Hold it for 3, and then out. 1, 2, 3. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So if you're counting, it gives your brain something to do. Because here's what happens with your brain when your body relaxes. It finds stuff to mess with. So you got to balance and get them both. Mind and body relax. Now give the image of you're at the top of 5 steps. First breath is 1 step down. Second 9 breath is, second step down to 5. It's kind of an auto-hypnotic trick that if you do that, you start calming yourself and you can relax. So there's some things you can do. And one of them also is, how do I know this is true? And it can always be worse. What's the worst thing about this? And it can always be worse. And if you put it through that 3-point standard, every thought, every question, every cognition, we call it, it won't stand the test most times. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you. It's been I've enjoyed all the information. I'm going to go process all of this and hopefully be back next week with my reflection of this interview. And I appreciate you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it as well. Please be sure to like and subscribe and give any questions or suggestions of what we went through today. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week. Bye.